Researching a culture seldom requires a laboratory. You don't need to wear a lab coat and you don't have to conduct experiments. In order to understand how people interact with each other, you have to go into the field. My name is Roehl Sybing. I'm a research associate at the University of North Dakota, and this is DocWork. And today we're going to look a little bit deeper into ethnographic research, specifically ethnographic data collection while you're in the field. I've already done a video about ethnographic research in general. We're going to talk about the specifics of what people do when they're in the field, what kind of data they collect, what kind of insights you're expected to gather. One of the main approaches to most ethnographic research is something called participant observation. You can look at a culture, look at a particular practice, look at a group of people, and observe from a distance what they are doing. You can take notes about it, and it would just be the same as if you were watching TV or watching another YouTube video. But you can capture richer data and different forms of data by actually participating within a particular culture. So with that in mind, we're going to play another round of Answer ChatGPT today. I have today's prompt: generate 20 questions that newer researchers and novices to social science research might have about ethnographic fieldwork. Focus on setting up fieldwork and conducting data collection in the field. And we played Answer ChatGPT previously with ethnographic research in general. I invite you to watch that video right after this one. So pretty much the same thing. We're going to select some of these questions and then we are going to answer them, what we think would be the most important questions that we can answer in this video. And if you have other questions that would be of interest regarding ethnographic research, make sure you leave a comment below this video. And of course, tell me what you think about this video and this channel. Right off the bat, let's start with this question. What steps should I take before entering a community as a researcher? So right off the bat, understand that when you are setting up a new ethnographic study, you will be doing it months ahead of time. There's naturally an ethics review process for any human subjects research. That's one aspect of a study that's going to be time consuming before you even do the data collection. But before you enter the field, it's important to get permission from the people whom you are looking to study, whose environment you are trying to observe. So when I was a PhD student, when I needed to set up my ethnography for my dissertation, it was set in a classroom in a Japanese university. And besides the teacher who I knew beforehand, nobody in the university knew who I was, knew why I was wanting to study them. If you were the administrator in that university, why would you grant someone like me permission? It's really important to have a relationship with the people that you want to study in order to gain access into the field, to be allowed to do the kind of participant observation that you will need to do to gather rich data. You're not just observing, for example, in a classroom. You are walking around, looking over students' shoulders, having a conversation with them. That can lead to a certain amount of intrusion that would otherwise be unwelcome if you didn't have that kind of permission. For my study, I had set up access to the research area about 5 to 6 months before I actually collected my first piece of data. It pays off to do the legwork ahead of time. You will find that if you are rushing to get into the research site weeks in advance instead of months in advance, it's going to be a rushed study that may not gather the necessary insights that you're looking for. So let's take a look at this question. What kind of ethical approval or IRB process do I need for ethnographic fieldwork? Because you are working with human subjects, the ethics process can take anywhere between weeks to months. As I said, it took me about 5 to 6 months before I got formal permission by my university to go to this site and study the people that I wanted to observe. The kinds of information that you will need to submit for ethical approval include how you will be protecting the research participants' privacy and confidentiality. What will you be doing with the data that you collect? How will you be storing it? What will you be doing to ensure that the data isn't accessed by anyone else? How much of the information will you be using in your eventual research output, such as papers or presentations? What, if any, personal information will you be collecting? And it gets down into the really fine details. If you can explain in exact detail how you are conducting the research ethically, you'll be able to go through IRB with as little pain as possible. This one's a good question. How can I prepare myself to handle cultural differences or potential misunderstandings in the field? That is a complicated question that depends on where you are going, what kinds of people are you expecting to encounter while in the field, and trying to put yourself in their shoes. How would you like to be treated? You also want to keep in mind, one thing that my professor would tell me in my PhD program is to always leave the research context better than where you left it, which means you want to give back to the community that you are observing. It's not enough to just be able to collect the data and then go, never to be seen again. It's really important to show research participants an abundant amount of respect for their time, for their energy, for the privilege of being in their presence. A lot of that won't appear in a research paper or presentation, but it does help in making the research go more smoothly so that you can collect richer, more comprehensive data. So when you go to a particular culture, think about what are the different things that might seem unusual to you, but in any case might seem perfectly normal to the people that you are looking to study. YouTube is a great resource. I tell my students to search for the name of the city plus walking tour. That way you can find videos of pretty much every place in the world where a YouTuber will walk around with a camera so that you can see the streets, the stores, the places that people inhabit, the way that people are interacting with each other. Get a sense of what everyday life is like so that when you go to that place, you don't seem so much like a deer in the headlights, that you become more likely to offend people by the manners, the words that you say, the different behaviors that might seem different to them. All right, next question. How can I balance participant observation with other research methods like interviews or document analysis? The basic way of understanding ethnography is using multiple research methods to look at the same object from multiple angles. Participant observation is one. You want to supplement that observation data with interviews or documents or focus groups or surveys. Depending on what you want to do, you want to make sure that what you capture in observations can be explained, corroborated, or contextualized through other methods. All right, let's do one more question in the first section. How can I build rapport and trust with participants while maintaining professional boundaries? Professional boundaries is probably going to be a loaded term that people may not agree with. The main idea is that you want to be respectful to your research participants and treating them in an ethical manner. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be standoffish. You don't have to necessarily keep an emotional distance from your research participants. But in the end, it's a judgment call depending on who you are studying, what data you're looking to capture, and what is best in terms of how to capture that data in an ethical manner. Now let's look at the second half of these questions. First off, what does effective participant observation look like in practice? The main goal of participant observation is that you are able to immerse yourself in the context and take enough field notes in enough detail that when it comes time to share your findings with your research audience, they feel that they might be able to immerse themselves in the research context without actually having to be there. This is a process called thick description, providing as much detail as possible relevant to the research inquiry in a way that allows the research audience to understand what it is that you are trying to convey in terms of scientific knowledge. My dissertation research involved taking notes in a notebook every day that I was doing observations. I filled that notebook with all of the different recollections that I had about things happening in class. I also reflected on those experiences, questions I would ask myself, things that I would do better in later observations. And so for the most part, the ethnographer, while they're in the field, there's hardly a moment where they are passive, sitting down somewhere and just watching the world go by. They are either participating in different activities that is happening around their environment, or they are taking notes about it. Or they might be informally interviewing the research participants within the context about what they have seen and what they have heard. So the next question is, how can I take detailed field notes without disrupting the natural flow of interactions? And that is an acquired skill. An emerging researcher might want to capture every single word, every little detail that occurs within the research context. For a good reason, you want to establish that thick description, but you may want to find ways to shortcut your note-taking. Instead of writing full sentences, at least while you're in the field, think about using keywords, using short phrases, writing as simply as possible, and then making your recollections more detailed after your actual observations. This is a skill that takes time to practice. It's certainly hard to do right at the beginning, but something that I tell my students to do is to go to a particular place on campus or near a place that they usually go to. Spend an hour, just without any research question in mind, just take notes in almost a stream of consciousness about what it is that they're observing, what it is that they hear, what it is that they feel about the research context and the events that are happening while they are observing them. It takes time to get those notes into a form that is brief enough that allows you to write more quickly and thus create more notes. What should I do if my presence as a researcher seems to change participants' behavior? Right off the bat, I'm going to say that is not necessarily a bad thing. If your participants are put off by your presence or by the way that you interact with them, that requires deeper reflection later on so that you can figure out the best way to collect data in the field while interacting with research participants. But the change in behavior should not necessarily put off ethnographers from collecting any data at all. If the participant's behavior does change, reflect on why. Maybe they're talking about their personal lives. Maybe they're worried that you might share some of their secrets. But whatever reflections that you have, make sure that you do record it in your field notebook. That way you can look upon it later. Always try to maintain the comfort level of research participants. You are not there in an adversarial role. You are there to capture their perspectives and their behaviors in a way that is respectful and provides as little anxiety as possible. How do I manage and organize large amounts of qualitative data collected in the field? You are going to be busy as an ethnographer. It's really important to collect your notes at the end of the day, write your reflections, type them out if they were handwritten. I like to use a notebook by hand. Transcribe the most important parts of interviews so that you can reflect on them later on. All in all, try to organize your data by different data types: observations, interviews, documents. The level of difficulty in data analysis depends a great deal on how well you organize data ahead of time. A lot of qualitative data analysis software allows you to take all of your data, put it into one project, and to divide your data into different categories. Make sure you take advantage of all of the organizational capabilities in your favorite QDA software. That way, the analysis, when it comes time to code the data, to document your reflections, and to do some systematic analysis, becomes infinitely easier in the long run. Let's do one more question. How can I stay reflexive about my own role and potential biases while collecting data? So, bias is not a bad thing. It's just something that is. You have to be able to account for your own biases. Think about how people in the research context and among your research audience might be swayed by their own biases. Account for them during data collection and data analysis so that when it comes time to produce your outputs, it becomes easier to reflect and think about how you can produce rigorous findings in research dissemination. One thing that I like to stress is the importance of understanding your own positionality in the field. Positionality basically means asking yourself, who am I relative to my research participants, and how do I interact with those research participants in a way that might be different than if another person was in my shoes. It's not just an internal exercise. It's required, if not recommended, of most ethnographers to detail reflexive notes in their notebook, thinking about who they are and who their research participants are, and determining what kind of relationship exists. All of those reflexive notes will fold into what is called the positionality statement or the reflexivity statement. This is typically a short description of your positionality as part of the methods section of a research paper. It's important that it's in the methods section because when you're describing your data analysis, what is the most important tool in data analysis? It's basically the human mind, your mind, and how you interpret that data is your data analysis. So it is required of ethnographers to be able to detail themselves in a thorough manner. That way, your research audience can understand transparently how the data was collected, analyzed, and organized in a way that produces rigorous and transparent findings. So I hope that takes care of some of the burning questions regarding ethnographic data collection while in the field. Remember to look at my video about ethnographic research and ethnographic field notes. This has been DocWork. My name is Roehl Sybing. If you like this channel, hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, and hopefully leave a question about what interests you about ethnographic research. I will see you in the next video.